A little girl gasps on Cries. He pushed me. Millionaire uncovers dark plot beneath the waves. Before we dive in, hit the like button if you believe kindness can change the world. Enjoy the story. The Mediterranean sun sparkled across the deck of the luxury research vessel Meridian Star. But beneath that perfect surface, something sinister was emerging from the crystal-clear waters. Help! Someone help her! Captain Moran's weathered hands gripped the rescue rope as crew members pulled an 8-year-old girl from the churning wake. Chloe Bennett's dark hair clung to her pale face, her small body shivering not just from cold water, but from something far more terrifying. As strong arms lifted her onto the deck, Chloe gasped for air, her brown eyes wide with determination. Water dripped from her trembling fingers as she clutched something small and silver, her precious recording device, somehow still gripped tightly even as she'd fought to stay afloat. "He pushed me," she gasped, her small voice cutting through the chaos. Her tiny finger pointed directly at Logan Reed, the hydraulics expert who stood among the concerned passengers. "He pushed me into the water." The deck fell silent, except for waves against the hull. Logan's face went pale, his mouth opening in shock. "What? That's impossible. I was in the navigation room the whole time." "Chloe, sweetheart, you're confused." Ethan Bennett dropped to his knees beside his daughter, his face torn between concern and embarrassment. At 34, the tech millionaire was used to solving problems with data and logic, not navigating an 8-year-old's accusations. "You probably slipped." But Chloe's eyes never left Logan's face. Even as her father wrapped her in a towel, she watched the man who had tried to kill her. Her small fingers tightened around her recording device. She had the truth. Now she just had to make someone believe her. Captain Moran, a 67-year-old Scotsman whose weathered face had seen countless storms, knelt beside the little girl. His pale blue eyes studied her carefully. "Lass," he said quietly, his accent thick with wisdom. "Are you certain of what you saw?" Chloe nodded, water dripping from her hair. "He was doing something bad to Daddy's computer. I saw him, I recorded it, and when he saw me..." She shivered. "He grabbed me and threw me over." Logan stepped forward, his expression concerned. "Captain, I understand the child is traumatized, but this is a serious accusation. Perhaps we should get her medical attention." "She didn't fall," Chloe whispered, but her voice was so small that only Captain Moran heard her. Ethan stood, torn between love for his daughter and professional relationships. Logan was here as his guest, invited to consult on the automated anchoring system that could revolutionize shipping navigation. "Maybe we should all take a breath," Ethan said diplomatically. "Chloe's been through a lot. Let's get her warm and dry and we can sort this out." But as the crowd dispersed, Captain Moran's hand gently touched Chloe's shoulder. In his pale eyes, she saw something her father's logical mind had missed: belief. The old captain had seen enough betrayal at sea to recognize a predator caught in the act, and he'd learned long ago that children often saw truths that adults chose to ignore. The Meridian Star continued its journey through calm waters, but beneath the surface, dark currents were beginning to stir. Truth has a way of surfacing, even when powerful people try to bury it beneath the waves. What would you do if you were the only witness to a crime and no one believed you? Stay with us as this little girl's courage exposes a conspiracy reaching far beyond this ship. 3 hours earlier, Chloe Bennett had been exploring the Meridian Star with 8-year-old curiosity. Her father was in another meeting with investors, discussing algorithms Chloe didn't understand but found fascinating. She'd learned to entertain herself on these business trips, armed with her digital recorder, a gift from her late mother, and an insatiable need to document everything interesting. The navigation room had drawn her attention because of the soft, blue glow beneath the door. Like a moth to flame, she'd slipped inside, her feet silent on the polished floor. The room hummed with modern technology. Banks of monitors displayed shipping routes, weather patterns, and positioning data. It was like stepping inside a spaceship, and Chloe pulled out her recorder. "Day 3 on Daddy's ship," she whispered into the device. The navigation room looks like something from Star Wars. There are screens everywhere showing where ships are going. She was about to leave when she heard footsteps. Quickly, she ducked behind monitors, her heart racing. Logan Reed entered, but this wasn't the friendly professional who'd shaken her father's hand at dinner. This Logan moved with purposeful stealth. His eyes darted to the door, then to the security camera, which had been turned away from the main console. Something cold settled in Chloe's stomach as she watched Logan pull a small device from his pocket. It looked like a USB drive with tiny wires attached. Her mother had always told her to trust her instincts, and right now, every instinct screamed that what she was witnessing was wrong. She lifted her recorder, finding the record button by muscle memory. Logan opened an access panel behind the main navigation console, a panel guests weren't supposed to touch. He worked quickly, his movements practiced. The small device disappeared into the maze of circuits. Sabotage protocol activated, he whispered to himself. Bennett's reputation will be destroyed by tomorrow, and his positioning system will be worthless. No one will ever trust his technology again. Chloe's hand tightened on her recorder. She might not understand all the technical details, but she understood betrayal. This man was hurting her father. Logan closed the panel and turned to leave. For a moment, Chloe thought she was safe, hidden in the shadows. But as he reached the door, Logan paused. His reflection in one of the dark monitors had revealed a small, familiar shape behind the equipment. "Well, well," Logan said, his voice completely different now, cold and sharp. "What do we have here?" Chloe's heart hammered as Logan walked slowly around the monitors. When he saw her clutching the recorder, his face changed completely. The mask of professional friendliness fell away, revealing something predatory underneath. "You've been recording, haven't you, little girl?" Logan's voice was soft, almost gentle, but Chloe could hear the threat beneath it. "That's not very nice. You might have caught something you weren't supposed to see." "I didn't see anything," Chloe lied, backing away until her shoulders hit the wall. Logan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I think you did. I think you saw exactly what I was doing. The question is, what are we going to do about that?" He moved closer, and Chloe realized with growing terror that they were alone in this room. Logan's hand reached toward her recorder. "Give me the device, Chloe. We'll just delete whatever you accidentally recorded, and then we can forget this happened." "No." The word came out stronger than Chloe felt. "You were hurting Daddy's computer. You said bad things about him." Logan's expression hardened. "Your daddy's technology is going to hurt people if it's not stopped. I'm actually trying to help. But you wouldn't understand that. You're just a child." "I understand that you're lying." Chloe clutched her recorder tighter. "And I understand that I need to tell someone what you did." For a moment, they stared at each other. The small girl with determined eyes, and the man whose professional future depended on silence. Then Logan lunged forward. Chloe was faster. Years of exploring ships had taught her to be quick and quiet. She darted around Logan and ran for the door, her recorder still clutched in her hand. But Logan was faster and stronger. He caught her arm just as she reached the corridor, his grip tight enough to bruise. "You're coming with me," he said, his voice deadly calm. "We're going to take a little walk on deck, and you're going to have an unfortunate accident. Children fall overboard all the time. Tragic, really." As Logan dragged her toward the upper deck, Chloe's mind raced. Her mother had always told her that when adults tried to hurt children, it was because they were scared. Logan was scared of what she'd recorded, which meant it was important. She had to survive this. She had to protect the truth. The Mediterranean sun was warm on her face as Logan pulled her onto the observation deck. Other passengers were scattered around, but they were far enough away that no one would see what happened next. "It's really quite simple," Logan said conversationally. "You're a curious child who leaned too far over the railing. These things happen." He lifted her easily, his hands moving toward the rail that separated the deck from the churning water below. Chloe looked down at the waves and thought of her mother, somewhere beneath the ocean's surface. But unlike her mother, Chloe wasn't going to disappear without a fight. Evil thrives when good people stay silent, but sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest truth. What this little girl captured will shock you, but first, she has to survive long enough to share it. If you're moved by stories of courage against impossible odds, consider subscribing. Captain Moran had been sailing these waters longer than most passengers had been alive, and in all those years he'd learned to read currents beneath the surface, both literal ones that could sink a ship and metaphorical ones that could destroy lives. As he watched Logan Reed comfort Ethan Bennett with carefully chosen words about his daughter's traumatic experience, the old Scottish captain felt a familiar chill. It was the same feeling he'd had 30 years ago when he'd pulled a young businessman from a sinking research vessel, the feeling that evil was wearing a friendly face. That young businessman had been Ethan Bennett, barely 4 years old, rescued from a yacht that had mysteriously lost power during calm weather. The boy's parents hadn't survived, but Moran had found little Ethan clinging to a life preserver. His small face set with the same determined expression Moran now saw on Chloe's features. Some children were born with the gift of seeing clearly, and both Ethan and his daughter possessed it. The tragedy was that Ethan had learned to ignore his instincts in favor of data, while Chloe still trusted hers completely. As the crowd dispersed and Logan excused himself to check on equipment, Captain Moran made his decision. He found Chloe in her father's cabin, wrapped in blankets but still gripping her recorder. "Lass," he said softly, settling into the chair beside her bed. "Your father's gone to speak with the ship's doctor. Would you mind telling old Moran what really happened?" Chloe studied his face with the careful attention of a child who'd learned that not all adults could be trusted. But something in Captain Moran's pale blue eyes reminded her of her mother, a steadiness that promised safety. "You believe me, don't you?" she whispered. "About Logan pushing me?" "Aye, lass. I've seen his kind before, men who smile while they sharpen their knives." Captain Moran leaned forward, his voice gentle but urgent. "Tell me everything." So Chloe did. She told him about finding Logan in the navigation room, about the device he'd hidden in her father's equipment, about the terrible things he'd said, and she told him about the recording. Captain Moran's expression grew darker with each detail. When Chloe played back the audio, his weathered hands clenched into fists. Logan's voice clear and incriminating. "Sabotage protocol activated. Bennett's reputation will be destroyed by tomorrow, and his positioning system will be worthless." "Sweet Mary," Captain Moran breathed. "Do you understand what this means, lass? This isn't just about hurting your father's business. If Logan's sabotaged the navigation system while we're at sea..." He didn't finish the sentence, but Chloe was smart enough to understand. Ships needed their navigation systems to avoid rocks and storms. Without them, even experienced captains were sailing blind. "We have to tell Daddy," Chloe said. But her voice wavered with uncertainty. "But he doesn't believe me." Captain Moran stood and walked to the cabin's porthole, looking out at the deceptively calm waters. "Your father's a good man, but he's forgotten how to trust his heart. The business world taught him that feelings are dangerous, that only facts matter, but some truths can't be measured in data." "Then what do we do?" Chloe asked. The old captain turned back to her, and for the first time since the incident on deck, he smiled. "We gather evidence, and we prepare for a storm." Over the next 2 hours, Captain Moran and Chloe worked together like detectives. The old captain showed her how to read the ship's instruments, how to spot anomalies that suggested tampering. Chloe, with her small size and natural curiosity, could access areas adults couldn't reach. They found Logan's fingerprints on access panels he had no business touching. They discovered backup communication equipment that had been subtly damaged. Most damning, they found evidence that Logan had been in contact with someone off the ship, someone very interested in the exact timing of the Meridian Star's arrival. "He's not working alone," Captain Moran murmured as they studied the evidence. "This is bigger than we thought, lass. Someone wants your father's technology to fail spectacularly." "Including us?" Chloe asked, though she already knew the answer. "Aye. including us. As if summoned by their conversation, Ethan Bennett appeared in the doorway. His young face was drawn with worry and strain. "Captain Moran, what are you doing?" "With my daughter? She should be resting." "Actually, Mr. Bennett," the old captain said carefully, "she should be saving all our lives." "Sit down, lad. It's time you heard the truth." But before Captain Moran could explain, alarms began to sound throughout the ship. Red lights flashed, and the calm afternoon was shattered by the mechanical voice of the emergency system. "Navigation. Failure. Manual control required." Through the windows, they could see jagged rocks rising from the water like ancient teeth, far too close for comfort. The Meridian star was heading directly toward them, and the automated systems that should have detected the danger had fallen silent. "All hands to emergency stations." Captain Moran barked into the communication system, his years of experience taking over. But as he grabbed the manual controls, he caught Ethan's eye. "Your daughter was right, lad, about everything. And if we don't work together right now, we're all going to pay the price for not listening to her." Chloe stood beside her father, her small hand slipping into his larger one. For the first time in years, Ethan Bennett stopped thinking about algorithms and data. He looked into his daughter's dark eyes and saw the truth he'd been too proud to acknowledge. His 8-year-old daughter hadn't just witnessed a crime, she'd uncovered a conspiracy. And now their lives depended on trusting her instincts over his technology. The rocks loomed closer, and Captain Moran fought to turn the massive ship away from disaster. But even as he worked, he knew that this was just the beginning. Logan had planned something much worse than a simple navigation failure. When technology fails, human courage becomes our only salvation. Sometimes the bravest hearts come in the smallest packages. This little girl's evidence is about to expose a conspiracy that reaches far beyond this ship. The Meridian star shuddered as Captain Moran fought the manual controls, sweat beading on his forehead as he struggled to turn the massive vessel away from jagged rocks. The ship responded slowly, and for several heart-stopping moments it seemed, as though 30 years of sailing experience might not be enough to prevent disaster. But the old captain's hands were steady, and his knowledge of these waters ran deeper than any computer algorithm. With mere meters to spare, the Meridian star cleared the rocky outcropping, her hull groaning with strain. The immediate danger had passed, but the crisis was far from over. Within minutes, Eliza Tran burst into the navigation room, her usually perfect composure cracked with apparent fury. At 42, Ethan's business partner had built her reputation on staying calm under pressure, but now her dark eyes blazed with accusation. "What the hell happened out there, Ethan?" she demanded. "Your precious positioning system nearly killed us all." Ethan stood frozen between his daughter and his business partner, the weight of conflicting loyalties crushing down on him. "Eliza, there's more to this than... More to this?" Eliza's voice rose to a pitch that made other passengers gather outside. "Your experimental technology just failed catastrophically. We came within meters of running aground because your system told the ship there were no obstacles ahead." Captain Moran stepped between them, his voice carrying the authority of decades at sea. "Miss Tran, if you'll just listen..." "Listen to what? More excuses?" Eliza turned to face the growing crowd of passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid we've all been put at risk by untested technology. Mr. Bennett assured us that his positioning system was ready for real-world testing, but clearly, the system was sabotaged," Chloe said, her small voice somehow cutting through Eliza's dramatic speech. "I saw him do it, I recorded it." Eliza looked down at the 8-year-old with an expression that mixed pity with barely concealed irritation. "Sweetheart, I know you're scared, but grown-ups are trying to solve a very serious problem right now." "I'm not scared," Chloe replied, lifting her chin with stubborn pride. "I'm trying to help. Logan put something in Daddy's computer to make it break." "Logan?" Eliza looked around until she spotted the hydraulics expert, who was standing at the edge of the group with an expression of perfect concern. "Logan, can you explain to this child why her accusation is impossible?" Logan stepped forward, his face a masterpiece of wounded professionalism. I'm afraid the little girl is still traumatized from her fall overboard earlier. It's completely understandable that she would try to find someone to blame for what happened, but I was nowhere near the navigation systems when they failed. You see? Eliza addressed the crowd again, her voice gaining confidence. Ethan, I'm sorry, but as your business partner and the primary investor in this venture, I have to insist that you step back from operational control of this ship. We need to contact the authorities and arrange for immediate evacuation before your system causes another potentially fatal malfunction. The crowd murmured agreement. From their perspective, Eliza's argument made perfect sense. They'd been put in danger by experimental technology, and now the man responsible was allowing his traumatized daughter to make wild accusations. Ethan felt the walls closing in. Everything he'd worked for was crumbling in real time. The positioning system that was supposed to revolutionize maritime safety had instead nearly caused the exact kind of tragedy it was designed to prevent. Daddy, Chloe whispered, tugging on his hand. Please listen to the recording, please just listen. But Ethan was drowning in the weight of public humiliation and professional catastrophe. When he looked at his daughter, all he could see was the reminder of another woman who had trusted her instincts over logic, who had insisted on taking that yacht out despite weather warnings, who had disappeared beneath these same waters because she'd been so certain she was right. Chloe, please, he said, his voice breaking. Not now. Daddy needs to think. The hurt that flashed across his daughter's face was like a physical blow. Chloe stepped backward, her small hands clutching her recorder as tears began to slip down her cheeks. You don't believe me either, she whispered. Just like Mama said you wouldn't. The words hit Ethan like a sledgehammer. In all the years since his wife's death, Chloe had never mentioned any conversations about him. The idea that his wife had known he would fail their daughter in her moment of greatest need was more devastating than any business failure. Eliza seized the moment to press her advantage. Captain Moran, as the senior maritime authority on this vessel, I need you to officially transfer navigational control to manual operation and send out a distress signal. Mr. Bennett's technology has proven to be dangerously unreliable. Captain. Moran looked at Ethan, then at Chloe, then at the crowd of passengers who were clearly siding with Eliza's assessment. His pale eyes lingered on Logan, who stood at the back wearing an expression of sympathetic concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. Very well, the old captain said slowly. I'll take full manual control of the ship until we reach port. But I want it noted in the official log that this decision was made under protest, and that there are irregularities that need investigation once we're safely ashore. Of course, Eliza said smoothly. A full investigation will clear up any confusion about what went wrong. As the crowd began to disperse, Chloe stood alone beside the navigation console, her recording device held tightly in her small hands. She had the truth, but truth without believers was just another kind of silence. Logan approached her as the room emptied, his voice soft and sympathetic. I'm sorry you got hurt earlier, Chloe. And I'm sorry your father is going through this difficult time. Sometimes accidents happen and it's natural to want someone to blame. It wasn't an accident, Chloe said, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. You pushed me, you broke Daddy's computer. I know it feels that way, Logan said, crouching down to her eye level with practiced gentleness. But feelings can be confusing, especially when we're scared. The important thing is that you're safe now, and your father is going to get the help he needs to fix his technology. For the first time since she'd witnessed Logan's sabotage, Chloe began to doubt herself. Maybe she had imagined the malice in his voice. Maybe the recording didn't actually prove anything. Maybe she was just a scared little girl who'd gotten confused. But as Logan stood and turned to leave, Chloe caught sight of something that made her blood run cold. In his jacket pocket, partially visible, was another small device identical to the one she'd seen him plant in the navigation system. Whatever Logan had done wasn't finished. And if no one believed her about the first sabotage, who would believe her about the second? The Meridian Star continued its journey through calm Mediterranean waters, but beneath the surface peace, the real storm was just beginning to build. Sometimes, the cruelest wounds come not from our enemies but from the people we love most when they refuse to see our truth. This little girl's courage is about to be tested in ways no child should ever face. But remember, the darkest hour comes just before dawn. The hours following the navigation crisis passed slowly aboard the Meridian Star. Ethan had retreated to his cabin, ostensibly to review technical data, but really to escape the accusing stares of passengers who blamed him for their near-death experience. Eliza had taken charge of damage control, making calls to investors and insurance companies, her voice carrying the crisp efficiency of someone cleaning up someone else's mess. But in the quiet corners of the ship, two unlikely allies were preparing to change everything. Captain Moran found Chloe sitting alone on the observation deck as the sun began to set, painting the Mediterranean in shades of orange and gold. She was holding her recorder, turning it over in her small hands like a talisman that had lost its power. "You look like a lass who's carrying the weight of the world," the old captain said, settling onto the bench beside her. "Nobody believes me," Chloe said quietly. "Even Daddy thinks I'm making things up." I've noticed that. It's a terrible thing when the people who should protect us choose comfort over truth." Captain Moran was quiet for a moment, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. "Can I tell you a story, Les?" Chloe nodded, though she didn't look up from her recorder. 30 years ago, I was sailing these same waters when I got a distress call. A yacht was taking on water, and there was a family aboard, a man, a woman, and a wee boy about 4 years old. Captain Moran's voice grew soft with memory. "By the time I reached them, the yacht was going down. The parents didn't make it, but I managed to pull the boy from the water." "Daddy," Chloe whispered, finally understanding. Your father. He was brave even then, clinging to that life preserver with determination that would have impressed grown men. But do you know what I remember most about that day?" Chloe shook her head. "The yacht's navigation system. It had been tampered with, just like what you described seeing Logan do. The family thought they were following a safe route, but someone had fed false information into their computer. They sailed straight into a storm that should have been avoided." Chloe's head snapped up, her dark eyes wide with understanding. "Someone wanted to hurt them?" Your father's parents were working on technology similar to what he does now, systems to make shipping safer. There were people who didn't want that technology to succeed." Captain Moran met her gaze steadily. "The same kinds of people who don't want your father to succeed now. But Daddy doesn't remember. He was 4 years old, lass. And afterward, the authorities decided it was just an equipment failure. Easier to blame technology than to admit there are people evil enough to sink a ship for profit." The old captain's voice carried decades of frustration. "Your father grew up believing that his parents died because they trusted their instincts over data. He spent his whole life trying to create systems that can't be fooled by human error. But people can still fool the systems," Chloe said, her quick mind grasping the irony. "Exactly. And that's what Logan's counting on, that your father will blame himself and his technology instead of looking for the real culprit." Captain Moran pulled a small device from his pocket, a high-end audio analyzer he'd borrowed from the ship's communication equipment. "Now about that recording of yours. You said it captures Logan confessing to sabotage?" Chloe handed over her recorder, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time since the navigation crisis. "It's all there. Everything he said about destroying Daddy's reputation." Captain Moran connected the recorder to his analyzer, his weathered fingers surprisingly deft with the modern equipment. "Let's see what we can learn when we really listen to what Master Logan thought no one would hear." The recording played, Logan's voice clear and incriminating. "Sabotage protocol activated. Bennett's reputation will be destroyed by tomorrow, and his positioning system will be worthless." But Captain Moran didn't stop the playback there. Using the analyzer's enhanced audio capabilities, he isolated background sounds, filtered out ambient noise, and amplified details that human ears might miss, and there it was. Another voice in the recording, so faint that Chloe's small device had barely captured it. Someone had been on the other end of a communication device, someone giving Logan instructions. Captain Moran enhanced the audio further, his expression growing darker as the second voice became clearer. When he finally identified the speaker, his weathered hands clenched into fists. "Sweet Mary," he breathed. "I should have known." "Who is it?" Chloe asked, though something cold in her stomach suggested she already knew. The enhanced audio played again, and this time there was no mistaking, the voice giving Logan his final instructions. "Make sure the failure looks catastrophic but not immediately fatal. We need Bennett to blame himself, not look for sabotage." It was Eliza Tran. "She's been planning this from the beginning," Captain Moran said, his voice heavy with disgust. "Your father's own business partner, the woman he trusted to help build his company. She's been setting him up for failure." Chloe felt tears of vindication mixing with tears of betrayal. She'd been right about Logan, but the conspiracy was even worse than she'd imagined. Why would she do that? Money, lass. It's almost always about money. Captain Moran disconnected the analyzer and handed the recorder back to Chloe. "Eliza has been positioning herself to take over your father's company once his reputation is destroyed. With him discredited and his technology deemed unsafe, she can purchase his patents for a fraction of their worth. And then she'll fix the problems she caused and claim she made the technology better? Smart lass. That's exactly what she'll do." Captain Moran stood, his pale eyes hard with determination. "But not if we can stop her first." "How?" "Nobody believes me about Logan, and now we're saying Daddy's business partner is trying to destroy him too? They'll think we're both crazy." Captain Moran smiled, and for the first time since the crisis began, it was a smile with real warmth behind. "Sure, aye, they might. But I've learned something in 30 years of sailing, lass. Truth has its own power, especially when it's backed by evidence and delivered at just the right moment." "What do you mean?" "I mean, we're going to give Miss Eliza Tran exactly what she thinks she wants, complete control of the situation. And when she feels safe and victorious, we're going to spring a trap that will expose her and Logan for exactly what they are." As the sun disappeared into the Mediterranean, Captain Moran and Chloe began to plan their counterattack. Neither of them noticed Logan watching from the upper deck, his face twisted with concern as he realized that his carefully orchestrated plan might have a fatal flaw. The little girl who had seen too much was still a problem, and problems at sea had a way of disappearing into the deep water. Truth isn't just about what we can prove. It's about having the courage to act when everyone else chooses comfortable lies. This conspiracy runs deeper than anyone imagined, but sometimes the smallest witnesses cast the longest shadows. Dawn broke over the Mediterranean with deceptive calm as the Meridian Star approached the port of Palermo. From the deck, passengers could see the ancient harbor growing larger, its stone walls and modern facilities promising safety and solid ground. But Captain Moran knew that the greatest danger often came in the moments when people believed they were finally safe. He'd spent the night implementing his plan with the precision of a master strategist. Using his decades of maritime contacts, he'd arranged for Inspector Rosa Benedetti of the Italian Maritime Police to be waiting at the dock, along with a technical specialist who could analyze the evidence of sabotage. More importantly, he'd ensured that news of the Meridian Star's navigation crisis had reached certain interested parties who would be very eager to witness Ethan Bennett's final humiliation. Eliza had taken the bait perfectly. Believing that she'd successfully orchestrated Ethan's downfall, she'd spent the morning making calls to investors and competitors, positioning herself as the responsible party cleaning up Bennett Industries' mess. She'd even arranged for a press conference at the dock, ostensibly to address safety concerns, but really to cement Ethan's public disgrace. What she didn't know was that Captain Moran had been recording every word. "Are you sure this will work?" Chloe asked, standing beside the old captain as they watched the harbor approach. She'd barely slept, her 8-year-old mind wrestling with the weight of what they were about to attempt. "In 30 years of sailing, lass, I've learned that truth has a way of surfacing, even when powerful people try to keep it buried." Captain Moran's weathered hand rested gently on her shoulder. "But it needs brave souls willing to speak it, no matter the cost." Ethan emerged from his cabin for the first time since the navigation crisis, his young face drawn with exhaustion and defeat. The man who had built a technology empire from nothing looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. "Daddy," Chloe said, softly, her heart breaking at the sight of his pain. Ethan barely glanced at her, his attention focused on the approaching dock where he could see reporters and cameras waiting. "Stay close to Captain Moran when we disembark, sweetheart. Things are going to be complicated for a while." "Ethan," Captain Moran said carefully, "before we reach port, there's something you need to know." "Please, Captain, not now." Ethan's voice carried the hollow echo of a man who'd given up fighting. "I know you mean well, but I need to face what I've done. My technology failed, people were put in danger, and I have to take responsibility for that." "Your technology didn't fail. Lad, it was sabotaged. I appreciate your loyalty, but we both know—" "Listen to the recording," Chloe burst out, her small voice cracking with desperation. "Please, Daddy, just listen to what I recorded. It's all there." For a moment, father and daughter stared at each other across a gulf that seemed wider than the ocean itself. Then Ethan knelt down to Chloe's level, his expression gentler than it had been since the crisis began. "Sweetheart, I know you want to help, but sometimes bad things happen without anyone being to blame. Your mother taught me that when she—" He stopped, the memory too painful to voice. "When she died because you didn't believe her about the storm?" Chloe asked quietly. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. In all the years since his wife's death, no one had ever articulated the guilt that ate at him daily. The knowledge that his wife had wanted to postpone their sailing trip because something felt wrong, and he'd insisted on following the weather data instead of her instincts. "How could you possibly know about that?" he whispered. "Because Mama told me. Before she died, she made me promise to always trust what I know is true, even if nobody believes me. She said that you would try to use numbers and computers to make sense of everything, but that sometimes the truth is something you feel in your heart." Tears were streaming down Ethan's face now. Years of suppressed grief and guilt finally finding release. "I failed her. I failed you. I keep failing everyone I'm supposed to protect." "No, Daddy. You just forgot how to listen." Chloe held out her recorder with steady hands. "But it's not too late. Please listen now." This time, Ethan took the device. As Captain Moran connected it to his audio analyzer and played the enhanced recording, Ethan's expression transformed from resignation to shock to burning anger. Logan's voice clear and damning. "Sabotage protocol activated. Bennett's reputation will be destroyed by tomorrow." And then Eliza's voice, even more devastating. "Make sure the failure looks catastrophic, but not immediately fatal. We need Bennett to blame himself, not look for sabotage." "My God," Ethan breathed. "Eliza. She's been planning this from the beginning." Captain Moran said grimly. "And if we don't move fast, she's about to complete her plan. She's arranged for a press conference at the dock to publicly blame you for the navigation failure. Once that happens, your reputation will be destroyed, regardless of what evidence we have." Ethan stood, and for the first time since the crisis began, his shoulders were straight with purpose. "Then we need to get to that press conference first." As the Meridian Star docked, Eliza was already on the pier, speaking to reporters and camera crews with the polished confidence of someone who believed victory was assured. Logan stood slightly behind her, playing his role as the concerned consultant who'd witnessed technology's dangerous failure. Neither of them noticed Captain Moran's earlier communications bearing fruit. Inspector Benedetti and her team were positioned throughout the crowd, and the technical specialist had already confirmed the presence of Logan's sabotage device in the ship's navigation system. "Ladies and gentlemen," Eliza was saying as the cameras rolled, "what we witnessed yesterday was a catastrophic failure of experimental technology that put innocent lives at risk. Mr. Bennett's positioning system nearly caused a maritime disaster, and as his business partner, I feel obligated to ensure that such dangerous technology is never deployed again." "Actually," a voice called out from the ship's gangway, "I think there's more to the story than that." All heads turned as Ethan Bennett walked down the gangway, flanked by his daughter and Captain Moran. Behind them came Inspector Benedetti and her team, their presence adding official weight to whatever was about to unfold. Eliza's composure cracked for just a moment before she recovered her professional smile. Ethan, I know this is difficult, but trying to deflect blame won't. I'm not here to deflect blame, Eliza. I'm here to assign it correctly. Ethan's voice carried clearly across the harbor, his words picked up by the microphones that had been meant to record his humiliation. Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday's navigation failure wasn't caused by faulty technology. It was caused by deliberate sabotage, orchestrated by my own business partner. The crowd erupted in confused murmurs as Logan stepped forward, his expression perfectly crafted to suggest concerned innocence. Mr. Bennett, I understand you're under tremendous stress, but these accusations are recorded, Captain Moran interrupted, holding up the audio analyzer. Every word of your confession enhanced and verified by Italian Maritime Police technical specialists. Inspector Benedetti stepped forward, her uniform and badge commanding immediate attention. Mr. Logan Reed and Ms. Eliza Tran, you are under arrest for maritime sabotage, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempted murder. Attempted murder? Eliza's mask finally fell away completely, revealing the cold calculation beneath. That's ridiculous. We never intended for anyone to be hurt. You threw an 8-year-old child overboard to silence her, Captain Moran said, his voice carrying the moral authority of decades at sea. In my book, that's attempted murder. As the police moved to arrest Logan and Eliza, Ethan knelt down beside his daughter, who had stood quietly through the entire confrontation despite being the key witness whose courage had made it all possible. I'm sorry, sweetheart, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I should have believed you from the beginning. I should have listened to your truth instead of hiding behind my fear. Chloe threw her small arms around her father's neck, and for the first time since her mother's death, Ethan Bennett allowed himself to trust his heart over his head. It's okay, Daddy, she whispered. Mama always said that love means learning to hear each other, even when it's hard. As the sun climbed higher over the ancient harbor of Palermo, truth finally surfaced from the depths where it had been hidden, and in the embrace of a father and daughter who had found their way back to each other, there was proof that some bonds are stronger than any conspiracy. Justice has many faces, but its most powerful form often comes through the courage of those who refuse to be silenced. This little girl's bravery didn't just save her father's company, it saved his soul. Sometimes the greatest victories come in learning to trust love over fear. The ancient stones of Palermo's harbor had witnessed countless arrivals and departures over the centuries, but few as emotionally charged as the scene unfolding on the Meridian Star's gangway. As Logan Reed and Eliza Tran were led away in handcuffs, their carefully constructed conspiracy crumbling under the weight of an 8-year-old's unwavering courage, father and daughter stood locked in an embrace that spoke of healing and redemption. Ethan held Chloe tightly, his successful businessman's composure completely abandoned in favor of something far more precious. The raw, unguarded love of a father who had almost lost everything that truly mattered. For years, he'd armored himself in data and logic, believing that emotions were dangerous variables that led to poor decisions and tragic outcomes. But here, in the warm, Mediterranean sunshine with his daughter's small arms around his neck and her recorder still clutched in her hand, Ethan finally understood what he'd been missing. The facts hadn't saved them, Chloe's courage had. Her intuition, her willingness to trust her heart despite every adult's skepticism, had uncovered a conspiracy that could have destroyed not just his company, but countless lives. Daddy, Chloe whispered against his shoulder. I need to tell you something Mama said. Ethan pulled back slightly, his eyes searching his daughter's face. Even now, 3 years after his wife's death, talking about her still felt like pressing on an open wound. But something in Chloe's expression told him this was important. What did she say, sweetheart? She told me that when she died, you would try to protect me by not feeling things anymore. She said you would think that loving people was dangerous because love hurt you when she went away. Chloe's dark eyes, so like her mother's, were serious beyond her years. But she also said that the only thing more dangerous than loving someone is forgetting how. The words hit Ethan like a revelation, unlocking memories he'd buried under years of professional ambition and emotional numbness. He remembered his wife's final conversation before that fatal sailing trip, her gentle insistence that some things couldn't be quantified or predicted, that sometimes the heart knew truths that the mind couldn't process. She was right, he said, his voice breaking. About the storm, about the danger, about everything, and I was so scared of making the same mistake again that I stopped listening to anything that couldn't be measured or proven. Even me? Chloe asked softly. Especially you. Because you're so much like her, sweetheart. You see things that other people miss, you trust your instincts, you believe in justice and truth even when it's inconvenient. Ethan's voice grew stronger as he spoke, and that terrified me, because I was afraid that if I listened to you the way I should have listened to her, I might lose you too. Captain Moran approached quietly, his weathered presence a steadying force amid the emotional turbulence. The old Scotsman had been watching the reunion with the satisfaction of someone who'd spent decades watching the sea claim good people simply because they'd forgotten how to trust each other. Begging your pardon, Mr. Bennett, he said gently, but I think there's something else you need to hear. Ethan looked up, still kneeling beside his daughter, his face open and vulnerable in a way it hadn't been since before his wife's death. What is it, Captain? When I pulled you from the water 30 years ago, you were just a wee lad, but you said something that I've never forgotten. Captain Moran's pale eyes were soft with memory. He said, the bad men made our boat break, but Mama and Papa loved me enough to save me. Even at 4 years old, ye understood that evil exists in the world, but so does love powerful enough to overcome it. Ethan felt tears stream down his face as the memory surfaced. Not the technical details of navigation failure and equipment malfunction that had defined his understanding of his parents' death, but the emotional truth of their sacrifice. They'd died putting him in that life preserver, choosing his survival over their own, trusting that love would be enough to see him safely to shore. I'd forgotten, he whispered. Aye, ye had. And that's understandable, lad. Grief has a way of making us forget the good along with the bad. Captain Moran's hand settled on Ethan's shoulder with paternal warmth. But your daughter never forgot. She's been carrying her mother's love and her grandparents' courage all this time, waiting for you to remember that feelings aren't the enemy of truth. They're often the only way to recognize it. Chloe reached into her pocket and pulled out something Ethan hadn't seen in years, a small waterproof locket that had belonged to her mother. Inside was a picture of the three of them taken during happier times. Mama told me to give this back to you when you remembered how to listen with your heart, instead of just your head, she said, pressing the locket into his hands. She said that when that day came, we could finally be a real family again. Ethan opened the locket with trembling fingers, looking at the image of his wife's face, radiant with love and laughter, everything he'd been too afraid to remember. But now, instead of pain, he felt warmth. Instead of loss, he felt gratitude for the love he'd experienced and the daughter who carried that love forward. We are a real family, he said firmly, slipping the locket's chain around his neck where it belonged. And we're going to stay that way no matter what challenges come next. Even if I see things that don't make sense to grown-ups? Chloe asked, though she was smiling now. Especially then, Ethan replied, pulling her close again. From now on, when my brilliant, brave, truth-telling daughter tells me something important, I'm going to listen first and analyze later. Inspector Benedetti approached with a clipboard full of official documents, but her expression was warm as she watched the family reunion. Mr. Bennett, we'll need formal statements from both you and your daughter, but I wanted you to know that the evidence she gathered has already led to several other arrests. This conspiracy reached far beyond your company. Ms. Tran and Mr. Reed were part of an international network that's been sabotaging maritime technology for years. How many other people were hurt? Ethan asked. We're still investigating, but it appears your daughter's courage may have prevented dozens of future attacks. Inspector Benedetti smiled at Chloe. Young lady, you should be very proud. Your decision to keep recording, even when no one believed you, may have saved countless lives. Chloe looked up at her father with the same expression she'd worn when she'd first tried to tell him about Logan's sabotage, hopeful but uncertain. Are you proud of me, Daddy? Ethan lifted his daughter into his arms, holding her against his chest where she could feel his heartbeat and know without question that she was loved and valued and believed. "I am prouder of you than I have words to express," he said, his voice carrying across the harbor where reporters were still documenting the aftermath of the conspiracy's exposure. "You were braver than any adult on that ship. You saw truth when everyone else was blinded by convenience. You saved not just my company but my soul." As the harbor bustled with activity around them, police finishing their arrests, reporters filing their stories, passengers disembarking with relief and gratitude, the Bennett family stood together in the sunshine, finally whole again. "Captain." Moran watched them with the satisfaction of a man who'd spent his life bringing people safely to shore, knowing that this rescue was perhaps the most important he'd ever performed. Not just saving a company or exposing a conspiracy, but healing a family that had been broken by fear and grief. The Mediterranean sparkled around them, vast and mysterious and dangerous, but no longer a symbol of loss. Today, it was a reminder that even the deepest waters couldn't drown love that was strong enough to surface when it mattered most. Love doesn't eliminate danger. It gives us the courage to face it together. This father and daughter found their way back to each other through truth and trust, proving that the strongest technology is an open heart. Sometimes the greatest victories lead to the most beautiful new beginnings. 6 months after the events aboard the Meridian Star, the Bennett Industries shipyard in Seattle buzzed with quiet excitement. Morning mist rolled off Puget Sound as technicians made final preparations for the launch of a vessel that would revolutionize maritime safety. Not through cold algorithms alone, but through revolutionary integration of human intuition and technological precision. Ethan Bennett stood on the dock beside the sleek research ship, his arm around his daughter's shoulders, as she clutched her ever-present recording device. At 9 years old now, Chloe had grown into her role as the youngest maritime safety consultant in history. "Tell me again about the new system, Daddy," Chloe said, though she'd helped design several of its most important features. Ethan smiled, his relationship with his daughter now built on communication rather than protection through distance. Well, the Chloe protocol combines traditional navigation with human observation networks. Every ship equipped with our system has multiple crew members trained to recognize the kinds of anomalies you spotted: behavioral patterns, technical inconsistencies, environmental factors that computers might miss. And if someone tries to sabotage it, the system is designed to prioritize human judgment when technical readings don't align with observed reality. If a crew member reports something that contradicts the computer data, the system automatically switches to manual verification mode. Ethan's voice carried pride, not just in the technology, but in the 8-year-old wisdom that had inspired it. "Essentially, we've taught machines to respect human intuition instead of dismissing it." Captain Moran approached from the ship's bridge, his weathered face bright with satisfaction. At 68, he'd officially come out of retirement to captain the Chloe's Truth, the prototype vessel that would demonstrate the new safety protocols to maritime authorities worldwide. "All systems check out perfectly, Mr. Bennett," he reported, his Scottish accent warm with affection for the family he'd helped heal. The crews completed their training on the human observation protocols, and I must say, it's refreshing to work with technology that values a sailor's instincts rather than dismissing them. "Speaking of instincts," Chloe said with the mischievous grin that had become her trademark, "I have a feeling today's test is going to go perfectly." "Well, if Chloe's instincts say so, that's good enough for me," Ethan replied, meaning every word. The months since Palermo had taught him to trust his daughter's insights completely. As the launch ceremony began, representatives from shipping companies, maritime safety organizations, and international trade authorities gathered to witness the maiden voyage of technology born from tragedy but refined by love. Ethan had been invited to speak, but he'd insisted on sharing the platform with the true architect of their success. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan began, his voice carrying easily across the assembled crowd, 6 months ago, my company's technology was sabotaged by people who believed that human judgment was a weakness to be eliminated from maritime operations. They were wrong." He gestured to Chloe, who stepped forward with the confidence of someone who'd learned that truth-telling was not just a responsibility, but a superpower. The Chloe Protocol exists because a 9-year-old girl trusted her instincts when every adult around her chose convenience over caution. Ethan continued. She saw what trained professionals missed, recorded what others dismissed, and refused to be silenced when powerful people tried to bury the truth. Chloe took the microphone with the ease of someone who'd spent months testifying before congressional committees and international trade organizations. Her voice was clear and strong as she addressed the crowd of adults who now hung on her every word. When I saw that bad man putting something in Daddy's computer, I knew it was wrong even though I didn't understand all the technical stuff, she said. Mama always told me that feelings are just information, and the feeling I had was that someone was trying to hurt people I love. She paused, looking out at the crowd with the same intensity she'd shown when facing down Logan Reed aboard the Meridian Star. The Chloe Protocol isn't really about computers or algorithms or any of that complicated stuff. It's about remembering that the most important technology we have is caring about each other enough to pay attention when something's wrong. The crowd erupted in applause, but Chloe wasn't finished. Today we're launching a ship that will help protect sailors all over the world. But the real launch happened 6 months ago, when Daddy remembered that listening to people you love is the most important safety system of all. As the Chloe's Truth was officially christened and began its maiden voyage into Puget Sound, Ethan felt a presence beside him that was both memory and promise. His wife's love lived on in their daughter's courage. His parents' sacrifice was honored in technology that valued human wisdom. And Captain Moran's guidance had helped him rediscover the truth that data without empathy was just noise. The ship moved through the water with grace and power, her advanced systems working in harmony with her crew's trained observations. On her bridge, Captain Moran stood at the helm with the same steady confidence he'd shown throughout his career, but now supported by technology that enhanced rather than replaced human judgment. "You know," Captain Moran said into his radio, his voice reaching the dock where Ethan and Chloe watched their dream become reality. "In 40 years of sailing, I've learned that the best navigation system isn't the one that never fails. It's the one that recognizes when it's wrong and asks for help." From her position on the dock, Chloe spoke into her recorder, documenting this moment for posterity. Day 183 after the truth came up from the deep water. Daddy's new ship is sailing perfect and strong, and nobody's trying to break anything today. Captain Moran says that's what happens when you build things with love instead of just smartness. She paused, then added with the wisdom that had saved them all, "I think Mama would be proud. We didn't just fix Daddy's computers, we fixed Daddy's heart. And that's the most important technology of all." As the sun climbed higher over Puget Sound, casting golden light across the water where the Chloe's Truth continued her flawless maiden voyage, Ethan Bennett pulled his daughter close and whispered the words that had taken him far too long to learn. "Thank you for teaching me to listen with more than just my mind, sweetheart. Thank you for showing me that the bravest thing we can do is trust love over fear." The harbor sparkled with possibility, and somewhere beneath the waves, the spirits of those who'd been lost to sabotage and negligence could finally rest in peace, knowing that their sacrifice had led to a world where human wisdom and technological advancement worked hand in hand to protect the innocent. In the distance, the Chloe's Truth sailed on, carrying with her the promise that even in the darkest waters, truth would always find a way to surface when guided by love and courage. Every child deserves to have their truth heard, and every parent deserves the chance to remember that love is the most powerful force on earth. If this story moved you, if you believe in the courage of children and the redemption of broken families, please share it with someone who needs to remember that hope floats even in the deepest waters. Like this video if you believe truth and love can triumph over conspiracy and fear. And subscribe for more stories that prove the human heart is our greatest technology. Because in a world that often values data over wisdom, we need voices brave enough to remind us that sometimes the smallest witnesses cast the longest shadows, and the greatest revolutions begin with someone having the courage to say, "I saw the truth and I won't be silenced." Thank you for listening, and remember, your voice matters, your truth matters, and love will always find a way to rise to the surface.